Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. Today we're going to offer 10 tips on how to safely operate a tractor on slope. Kelly's going to be on camera, so say hi to her now.
Hi.
Not you, them.
Oh.
Okay, all right, that works. All right, come along. Okay, the timeliness of this video is based upon an email I got from one of y'all last week, just kind of asking about my take on the Coyote and how we use it on our steep slope here. And so that's why we're doing this. So probably the first thing we need to do is define slope. And I'm saying, yeah, for you flatlanders that think, oh, I've got a sloped yard and maybe water runs a certain direction. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about West Virginia slope here, 30 degrees or more. We're talking some serious incline. So there's some things you have to take into consideration when operating a tractor on that type of slope. But we're going to go into the woods and give some examples. All right, so the first tip is kind of a no-brainer, and that's stay off of it if you can. So here in West Virginia, where we have all these varying degrees of slope going up the mountain, what we try to do is stay off the steepest stuff if possible. So we cut roads, we cut accesses on these benches, these flat areas that we have already, and then just kind of stay off the steeper stuff. So as you see behind me here, where the forest area goes up the hill, we may clear a little bit of that at some point as we make more pasture, up 30-40 feet, but the rest of that, where it gets even steeper, it'll just stay woods. And if we're going to harvest trees from that, or we need to get anything off of that, then it'll have to be accessed with, you know, winch, cable, that type of stuff. We're just not going to be on it. We'll just leave those parts out. So some flatlanders may not realize that with 100 acres that we have here, I don't access all 100 acres with my equipment. Now I can by foot, but not with my equipment. So one tip, and it may seem kind of obvious, is operate your tractor on slope in a north-south direction or an up and down direction versus a lateral or east-west. So take, for example, our pasture that we're standing in here. Camera may make it look like it's kind of flat, but it's pretty serious grade. And over the years, I've mowed this, the pigs have access to it, all that type of stuff. But when I mow it, I back down this hill all the way down to the tree line and drive all the way back up. I don't try to turn around. I don't try to turn sideways and mow sideways. I'm always mowing in this north-south direction. And that keeps me from getting sideways, which of course could cause the tractor to roll. The one thing you have to watch with these tractors is there's little to no suspension whatsoever. The back wheel is a straight axle, so those wheels don't articulate at all. On my Coyote, the front wheels just pivot at a center point right underneath the center frame. So the front wheels can maybe do this to some degree, but other than that, there's no suspension whatsoever. So just imagine if I was on this slope and was mowing sideways, everything here is nice and somewhat gradual, so I can handle it pretty well. But with that tractor suspension, if I came to this spot that the pigs had made a little flat area, and this was a green, bushy time of year where I couldn't see this, then that right front tire could fall right into this depression, and before I know it, the whole tractor's gone over. So that lateral direction already has you pointing down the hill a little bit, and then when you hit this downhill pothole or this depression, then that front tire could drop into there, or the back tire, and then it's all over. It flips before you know it. And the reason why this really sticks in my mind, unfortunately, is when I was in college, I was really into scuba diving. My brother and I, we did a lot of scuba diving, went through training, and our dive instructor at the time was a great fella, and he had a farm very similar to this, and he had a clearing like what we're on right now, had a big brush pile going, and had his quad there where he was tending the brush pile. Right at dark, he gets on this quad to drive back home, and he's on the uphill side of the brush fire, and drives a tire into a depression like this that he didn't realize, caused the quad to flip over directly on the brush pile, which pinned him, and unfortunately he burned to death. So you just have to watch. I don't even want to take a lateral movement as an option on the farm. I want to always go up and down or north-south on the hill.
He's gonna pick me up.
So my third tip when driving up or down slope is to drive slow. Don't be in a hurry, even though your road conditions may seem to be okay, and you can drive down fast or let gravity kind of take you down, or you're going to drive fast because you got work to do. Just slow down. What can happen with some of these tractors, especially tractors that are light in the front end, as you're going up a hill, your front end's kind of light to begin with, especially if you have an attachment on the back. And then if you're going fast, you can hit a bump or a water bar, and the next thing you know, that front end's wanting to come up, and real quickly, you can't underestimate the torque of these tractors. Real quickly, you can actually drive underneath yourself. So you can have those back wheels engaged, and it could just bring you on over. So you don't want to do that uphill. You don't want to be going too fast that you get that front end bouncing. All right, so the rest of these tips actually involve the properties of the tractor itself. So if you're in the market, if you're going to upgrade or you're just getting a tractor, maybe consider some of these things before you make that purchase. Don't just grab a tractor because it's a really good deal. All right, I think the first thing, and this is more of opinion than it is fact, but I think the first most important thing is for a tractor on slope, you got to have four-wheel drive. And to me, that's a non-negotiable deal. When I got this Coyote, it had to be four-wheel drive. I wasn't even looking at two-wheel drive options. Why is that? Well, obviously with four-wheel drive, you get better traction. There's a no-brainer. So as you're going up slope or going down slope, you have more grip, more grab. That's going to allow you to not get stuck or spin out. But also, four-wheel drive gives you a little bit more balanced weight because that front drivetrain, that front differential, all that mechanics, all that weight that are added to the front, you get better balance. Whereas a two-wheel drive tractor, it's really the engine and then any front weights you add that offer that front weight. So four-wheel drive is going to give you better weight there. It's also going to give you a better or a lower center of gravity, again, simply because of that distribution. All that extra drivetrain that's needed in the front is lower. It's lower setting on the tractor, so that makes the heavier portions of the tractor lower to the ground, thus giving you a broader center of gravity. All right, so the next tip is for two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, doesn't matter, but that's, and we mentioned center of gravity, but that's try to strive for the lowest center of gravity possible. And I'm not going to get into the physics of center of gravity, but basically the more distribution of weight, the lower it is to the ground, the lower center of gravity, thus making it more stable on slope. So there's things you can actually do to upgrade the tractor or change the tractor setup to give you that lower center of gravity. So just a real obvious example is even like with this 3-point hitch attachment, my box blade. You can see how high right now, I've got it in its maximum height position. So if I was on a gradual slope and I was running laterally with that slope, my center of gravity is higher simply because this blade is higher. But I can easily take the controls here and lower it down, and just even operating at this height is automatically lowered that center of gravity significantly, so I'd be more stable on that slope. Obviously, you don't want to lower it too slow or too low that it drags the ground, but I can get it low to the ground to give me a lower center of gravity. So one simple thing to do, and most of these tractors are manufactured this way, is turn the wheels out. So you see how deep this dish, this pan of my wheel is on the rear, and the same on the front. Well, when I bought this tractor, they were actually turned the opposite way. So the recess was further under the fender so you wouldn't sling as much mud up in your face. But to lower the center of gravity, you have the option of turning the wheels out so that makes the stance wider and thus giving you a lower center of gravity. Now what you have to worry about is don't take this tire or wheel and just simply turn it around on itself, because then if you've got ag tread, you're running the wrong direction. So what you got to do is you take one wheel off one side and put it opposite direction on the other side so your treads are going the same direction. But there can be considerable difference here in the amount of stance, the wider stance that your tractor gets simply by rotating the wheels that way. Well, another option that people do a lot is they also load the tires. And normally load just the back tires, but loading means that you're going to take a tubeless tire and you're going to fill it full of something heavy. So back in the old days, it would be antifreeze. They'd fill it with antifreeze so it wouldn't freeze, of course, but the liquid was super heavy. Ethylene glycol, all that type of stuff could go in. And there's other liquid options that aren't as environmentally unfriendly. But then they also have this weighted foam where they actually can inject this foam material in it, and it kind of makes the tire solid. So the whole thing is just super chunky, super heavy because it's a weighted foam. Well, another tip is what type of tread is on your tractor. Now, there's a lot of different tread types. There's R1, there's R3, there's R4. Those are the common. Then I think there's other variations. But, and I actually did a video about all that. If you want to see it, you can click on it here, I believe. But I run R1s, which are the traditional ag treads. So these heavy lugs, they grip and bite and do really well when climbing or descending a slope. They bite into that soil, that ground, and really latch hold. Sliding over a hill in West Virginia is a very common thing. It can happen a lot. So even with ag tread, you've got to watch that there are times that this tread works well to your advantage, and other times it's to your disadvantage. So if I was driving on slope, on contour, and it was really wet, really muddy or icy, there's not a lot of grip laterally on this. So there's times I've had the tractor just kind of move sideways or kick sideways simply because this grip isn't as effective this way as it is this way. Now with ice, if you're dealing with solid ice, like if the driveway was covered with ice being paved, then I would never take this tractor on it because these lugs just become ice skates at that point, and I could walk down the driveway safer than driving this thing down it. So if you have R3s, which are the turf tires, which are great for your lawn, they don't tear things up, but they can gum up real quick, or they have hardly any traction when it comes to pulling a grade, or even the industrial tread, which is the R4s. In my experience, while they still have lugs that look similar to this, they tend to pack with mud quicker because they're closer together and not as aggressive. And once they're packed with mud, then they might as well be bologna skins. So that's something to look at when purchasing a tractor, or if it's time to upgrade your tires, maybe look at an ag tread if you've got slope to deal with. Well, another tip is to drive in the direction that your weight imbalance is on. So you can kind of use that to your advantage. So like in this example, Kelly and I had this 55-gallon drum full of mercury that we wanted to bring up and dump in one of the watersheds. So we drove up the hill, so saw that weight was on the front. But then we realized that's probably not the smartest thing to do, put all that mercury upstream in our watershed. We then decided to go back down the hill, and that back down puts that weight on the uphill side to keep me from being nose heavy. So whether it's an implement on the back or an implement on the front, drive up or back down, or however that works. So like when I take hay, the big round rolls of hay with the 3-point hitch spike on the back of the tractor up to the farrowing shed, I back up that mountain because that's where all the weight is on the front, versus having it on the back, which of course could cause the front end to come up even with the front loader. Well, another tip is to try to balance the weight front and back of the tractor if you're operating on slope. So obviously with a two-wheel drive, usually your front end of your tractor is lighter naturally because 3-point hitch, operator, all that type of stuff. You know, the motor is really the only thing that keeps the front weighted down. That's why you see a lot of people put front weights on two-wheel drive tractors. So that's an option. You buy those weight plates and just keep adding them. For my situation, four-wheel drive makes it a little heavier, but then of course the front loader makes the front end real heavy, and the front loader comes in super handy in that situation. So in this example, even though the loader is a great tool to move things around, if I've got some weight on the back end or I'm going up a steep slope, then there's times that I'll just load the front bucket maybe with dirt or gravel, whatever the case may be, because you can see how cantilevered that weight would be forward from the front of the tractor. So it really displaces that weight forward and keeps the front end from being light. So I constantly keep a 3-point hitch attachment on the back of the tractor, even if I'm not using it. You see I have the box blade on. I usually run that 90% of the time, and that really helps cantilever or balance the weight when I'm using the bucket to lift logs, even on the sawmill, even on flat ground. That can become an issue. I can make the rear end too light that we end up doing a wheelie. The camera woman loves to see me do that when she's standing there and I get, you know, one tire off the ground or 2 tires off the ground. Now, if I really need some weight, then I go to the mower. This is a 5-foot deck mower, and by the time it's hooked to the tractor, it really cantilevers the weight back. So if I've got a lot of heavy lifting to do with the front bucket or pulling a big log off the hill, then maybe even come down and get this put on so it provides that weight so much further back from the tractor. The only problem with this is it doesn't give me agility in the woods to turn around because it sticks out so far that by the time I get to the back of the bush hog and the front of the loader, then I've got a real long vehicle that I'm trying to turn around in the woods. But this provides some great weight and great displacement of weight. All right, so the next tip is unbelievably, well, maybe it's believable, it's one of the most controversial, and that is to have ROPS and a seat belt. If I think in most situations the tractor is going to maybe roll over or it has an opportunity to roll on its top, or 180-degree roll, then I most definitely want a ROPS and a seat belt on. Now, if I'm at the top of this mountain where we've got half of it cleared, and I start to roll and I'm going to roll all the way till it gets to the bottom, I don't want to still be on this thing. One of the benefits of the ROPS is if the tractor rolls, there's a chance that this ROPS, this roll bar, is going to stop the tractor from going more than 90 degrees. So if I'm in here and it goes 90 degrees, and maybe all I have is a knot on my head and maybe an injured right arm if I'm going this way. If it's going to continue to roll, then the tractor's going to fall apart by the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, so it's hard to tell what situations are in. Don't make the mistake that a lot of people do where they think, I don't need a seat belt, I don't need a ROPS, because if that tractor's going to start going over the hill, I'm jumping off of it. Physics and gravity are going to work against you every time, and very rarely does somebody jump opposite the direction that the tractor's going and be able to get clear of it. Most of the time you jump and you're going downhill with it, and you just have to pray that you're not pancaked as it comes over. All right, post a comment below. Let's see if we can get this going. Post a comment below that you say yes, thumbs up, seatbelt and ROPS every single time, or you say no, absolutely not, would never use ROPS or seatbelt on my tractor. Let's see if we can get a little debate going here. All right, so the 10th and final tip is just remember that when things get old, things break, and gravity can kill. And what I mean by that is no matter how much you maintain these tractors, even if it's a brand new one, at some point it's going to get old and things are going to fail. So when you're operating on slope, the failure of some of that equipment could result in some really bad circumstances. And I've got two stories real quickly I want to tell of that. The first was my uncle. He had an old 4-to-8N and was driving up one of his roads on a pretty good slope, and he noticed the front end was starting to get a little light. So he went to depress the clutch to obviously slow everything down, let it come to a stop so he could get that front end down. But the clutch had gone out and he was unaware of that. So as he tried to depress the clutch, he wouldn't do it. Before he could react to turn the tractor off or kick it out of gear, the tractor raised up and went over the hill and rolled. It didn't have a ROPS, it didn't have a seat belt. Fortunately, he fell between two large rocks as the tractor rolled over him, and all that happened is it smashed his right knee. So he was gimpy for several months, but he survived that. Now the tractor, it didn't survive it. It got beat all to pieces. The second story is an acquaintance of mine that was operating one of those, it wasn't a tractor, but it was one of those small mini compactor rollers, like you'd call them a steamroller, but it was a little mini roller, half the size of my tractor, and he was compacting the gravel on his driveway. Well, the thing popped out of the gear. It just the synchronizers, whatever, just failed in that. So it popped out of gear and it just started freewheeling. So you imagine all the weight associated with that compactor, and it turned and rolled. And when it rolled, the gear shift, that floor-mounted gear shift, actually disemboweled him. Just completely tore open his innards, unfortunately, and he lost a lot of blood. And the result is he's confined to a wheelchair the rest of his life. So he survived, fortunately, but he's a paraplegic now. So that was a real tough situation to deal with. So the idea that gravity kills, no matter what you have in place, no matter what you're doing on slope, if the force of gravity exceeds the resistance of your traction or your tread or whatever you're using there, then you can't fight physics and you're going to break loose. That's why a lot of you guys comment when you see me skidding logs off the mountain that, hey, why don't you have a log dolly so you don't get your log all dirty? Well, I want to have that log dragging versus being on a set of tires, because if that's too much weight, that's multiple thousand pounds usually that's pushing me down the hill. If I want to bail out real quick, then I can drop my box blade, and that log now becomes an anchor or a parachute, if you will, and can stop me versus pushing me down the mountain. No matter what, probably the best tip that I can give you in all of these circumstances is just be ready. Rehearse in your mind if you're going to go down a steep slope or up a steep slope, or you're going to be operating in a situation like that, to just be ready. If I've got to be ready to drop the bucket to maybe stop me, or to drop the box blade to be a drag for me, then I have rehearsed in my mind, okay, I'm going to be ready to do this if this thing starts to move or starts to give way. You double check that I've got my seatbelt on if that's what I feel is pertinent at that point. So just be ready, rehearse in your mind what you're going to do if something starts to break loose. Well, I hate to end this video on a gloomy note, but I just want to express the seriousness of it. Kelly and I have realized over the last couple years, we've helped quite a few people move to West Virginia, and quite a few of those people are flatlanders. And not that I would say I'm responsible, but I feel that it's important that if they're still watching the channel, that if they come to a mountainous area and they're going to try doing some of their homestead stuff with a piece of equipment like this, that you have to keep in mind the risks that come with this type of topography. I know people want to come here and explore their homestead dream. I just want to see you guys that do this have the opportunity to live that dream out as long as possible and not get flat stanleyed by your tractor because you just weren't prepared to handle it on slope. Well, I appreciate everybody watching. Comment below, tell me what you all think, and we'll get some dialogue on there. I'm going to sign off, and so's the camera lady. Say goodnight, camera lady.
Good night, camera lady.
There you go. Y'all take care.